And welcome, W. Parrish, Terrence, and Armando, and Rafaela, Ari, and Brianna, and Mark, and Calvin, and Alex, and Victor, and Eileen. And who else is watching this as an archived webinar, and those who are about to come, hopefully. This is the second week of the class, and this is the week 2 webinar. And what we're going to cover today is chapter 3, which is probability, and also project 1. So those are the two big things I'm going to talk about. It's kind of interesting. Chapter 3 is actually, there's not that much for me to say, but most people find it the hardest chapter of the entire book. So I should give you a warning about that. Unlike last week, we did 2 chapters. Sounds hard. This week we're only doing 1 chapter. The 1 chapter is harder than both of those 2 combined for most people. So I do my best to try and balance it to make sure that we have 2 chapters when they're easier chapters. So probability is really, really, really important. It's going to be important for all of what we do in statistics. And it's also just important in itself to be able to compute probabilities for various reasons. So I want to start out, as always, if there are any questions about anything, this is a great time to ask. I want to remind you that these webinars are all about being able to ask me questions and have interaction, immediate feedback, and immediate answers, instead of having to wait a couple hours or whatever until I answer your question, if you post on the Q&A. This is a great time to ask any questions you might have.
So Larry, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Yeah. So I guess I just want to make sure I understand the chapter the best. So it looks like there's a lot of laws and rules and for the all of that. So basically what I kind of got out of it is practicing and being able to read which formula, if you will, best fits for that scenario.
It turns out it's a challenge. Yeah, that is the biggest challenge, is to take a sentence, figure out how to take that sentence and what probability it's asking for. Mm-hmm. That's what you mean, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. In terms of the formulas, what I recommend is the formulas that you don't want to have to memorize, put them on your note card, because you get to have a note card for the tests. Can you use the EL531TG calculator in class? I've actually never heard of that calculator. Let me just, in a second, EL531TG. See what Google says. Okay. It's a sharp scientific calculator. Just by looking at it, let me just type in the word statistics too. See what it does. The question is, does it have hypothesis testing and confidence intervals? And it looks like it may not. Let me just type in confidence interval. Let's see if it does it. How to calculate a standard deviation, confidence interval for proportions, calculator addition. Yeah, it looks like it may not. I'm just looking at Google, and I'm not, because again, I haven't seen this calculator, and it doesn't look like it has the capability for the class, because it doesn't look like it has confidence intervals and hypothesis testing, which is a big part of this course. Probably 40% of the whole class is those 2 things. So that probably won't work. Sorry about that. But on Google, it crosses out either the name of the calculator or the word confidence interval. When I look it up, it has no articles with both of those, and that's a bad sign. But I haven't played with the calculator, so I'm on the spot trying to guess, but it looks not so good. Sorry about that. So the good news, again, is the requirement of the calculator is not until the midterm. So you got a lot of time, but don't wait till the last minute, because you can use a spreadsheet for everything for now. It's just you can't use a computer for the tests. Other questions? Other questions? These are really good questions, though. Again, that's the whole point. Other questions you might have? Okay, so if you don't have any questions, what I want to do is we're going to do a little bit. I'm going to share my desktop, just a whiteboard basically, because that's what we want to be able to do. Is we want to be able to use a whiteboard. I use Paint, good enough for a whiteboard. So let me do that, and then we're going to calculate some probabilities and talk about it. And I'm going to use y'all, see how it goes. Just a minute. And one more second. I need the chat box. And I know if you're watching this on YouTube, you won't be able to see the chat box, but I'll be saying what's typed in basically, so we'll be able to handle that. Okay, so we want to find the probabilities. First thing, let me look at something, how many people we have here, and that's important too. That's over here. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to count you and not me though. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So you have 19 of you. Okay, that could change, but hopefully not, because we're going to deal with some numbers. So let's find, let's start doing some different things. Let's say event A, let me get to font, make it a little smaller, or it gets way too big. Let's say A lives in Tahoe. Okay, and let's say B is, the goal is medical profession. Okay, so medical profession could be nursing or doctor or just something that you're working with patients. Okay, so I'm going to survey you. And what I want to do is I want to say, what is the probability? So let me type it in words before we do the survey. That student lives in Tahoe. Okay, so the first thing is we want to take that and we need to write it in symbols. So that's always the very first step of handling probability questions. So the first thing is a definition of probability is a fraction. Whether you like fractions or not, that's just the way it is. And the way it works, write it out, is that the probability of an event, I'm going to use X for, I'm going to use A actually for live in Tahoe, because we want to find out probability lives in Tahoe. Probability of A is equal to, it's going to be a fraction. So the numerator of the fraction will be the number in A. And then the denominator of the fraction will be the total. So in this case, the total I said was 19, because I just went and I counted the number of students. So now you need to hopefully put in the chat box, just put in a yes if you live in Tahoe. And I'm going to count the number of yeses. It's very simple. We're starting simple and we'll get harder. We got 2, 3. Give you another minute. Shouldn't take long to type yes, or Y and N are fine. Hopefully you give me a Y or an N. So yes if you live in Tahoe, and if you don't live in Tahoe. Okay. And I might just go with what we got, even though it may not be perfect, because, okay, so I'm getting a lot of N's. Okay, so I'm just going to hang with it now. I got 3 yeses. So that means that this probability will be equal to 3 over 19. Any questions on the kind of the definition of probability? Any questions? Oh, you know, I have one more. Mark said he lives in Tahoe. Sometimes it takes a while to type in. So make that 4. So to get rid of that, I think I need to go to select. Get the real number. So it's 4/19. Any questions so far? Again, I always start easy, it gets harder. Let's do another one. Let's find the probability. Actually, let's write it a little differently. If I select a student in the medical profession, what is the probability that the student lives in Tahoe? Any questions on the question? Okay, so for this one, what we need to do is we need to come up with what this is asking. So notice that we know something about the student before we even look at the probability. And when you know something before you look at the probability, we call it a given problem. So in this case, what we know is they're in the medical profession. And we want to find out the probability they're in Tahoe. And the way you write that in symbols, and it's very important to be able to write in symbols because we're going to have formulas, is that is going to be what is the probability of B, okay, of A, what is the probability to live in Tahoe? And then I'm going to draw a little horizontal line segment. And the way you read that is the word given. So find the probability of A given that they're in the medical profession, which is B. So I want to stop for a second. Are there any questions about the symbols here? Any questions? All right, so to calculate this, there's going to be a formula. And the formula is the following. Is the probability of A given B, oops, I need an equal sign first. It's going to be a fraction also. And in fact, probabilities are basically always fractions. So the probability of A given B, we're going to have a fraction. So let me just make a little fraction bar. And the numerator of that fraction will be the probability of A and B. So that means both have to be true for that event to happen. And then the denominator is the probability of B. Any questions so far?
No.
Yeah, if you want a symbol, I like to use A and D because everyone knows what that is. But most people know the symbol for and. Let me type it. You seen that symbol? Yeah, that's the symbol for and, but yeah, I like the word and because it reads better. But if you want to use the and symbol, that's fine too. Okay, and maybe you were looking for some fancy math thing. But no, that's all you write. But there is for given. See, given doesn't have, it's just too long a word to write the word given. So you use that little vertical line segment. And the important thing is to realize the known is B, and what you're interested in finding out about is A. Okay, that's how givens always work. Whatever's on the right-hand side of the line segment is the known. What's on the left-hand side is what you want to find the probability of. Any questions so far? Okay, so now I need to keep on surveying. Let you type in type in a yes if your goal is medical profession, a no if your goal is not medical profession. And YN is fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Give you a little bit of time. That means probability is going to be 10 over 19. All right. I also need to know, and let me write that down. Probability of B is 7 over 19. I'm writing on paper because I need to put it in here. Okay, we need to find the probability of A and B. So now type in a yes if you're in the A and B category, which means you live in Tahoe and your goal is medical profession. Can't be more than 4 of you. So I've got 2 yeses, 3 yeses. My guess is that's it. Okay, so what we can say is that that probability is going to be equal to 3 over 19 divided by seven over 19. Okay, and I don't know if you can do it in your head and like I can, but that's 3/7. Any questions at all? Any questions on all on this calculation here? Any questions? Okay, I want to give you a big, strong warning. It's not that hard to watch me do it. Do y'all agree? But any guess on what I'm about to say? Okay, it's not hard to watch me do it, but it is actually really hard to do it yourself. And my definition of hard is how well do people do on the test questions when I give them a test question. And this is a tough one for people. They have a lot of trouble being able to read the sentence and turn it into an equation. Okay, so that's a good question. Will the answer always be in fraction form or is decimal okay? You always start with a fraction. Now, if you're doing the computer assignments, always read the instructions. And if it says write as a fraction, you need to write as a fraction. If it says round to a decimal 3 places or 4 places, you need to do that. So whatever the instructions are is what you need to do. But the definition of probability is a fraction. Does that make sense, Ken?
Yeah. Hey, Larry.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything when I was watching the chapter 3 video. So when I was watching it, I don't remember like anything about like the examples of like 3 over 19 then divided by the 7 over 19. They were all pretty simple. They were much simpler than those. Is that
Well,
right?
it is pretty simple. It's just 3/7, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, like you said, it was simple for you.
Okay. You don't see the 19s canceling?
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, that's all I did. I just canceled the 19s. I promise I didn't do anything too fancy. I just canceled the 19s. That was it.
Okay.
I didn't do some calculus or something like that.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, so I promise that wasn't supposed to be the hard part of this for most people is literally reading this and figuring out how to write the symbols, A given B. Okay, and then remembering to put a note card. Okay, I want to mention a couple more things. One is there is something called the definition of mutually exclusive. So mutually exclusive, let me write this down. I think I'll put it in red. Means the probability of A and B is equal to 0. So this should be an easy question. Is living in Tahoe and having the goal to be in the medical profession, are those mutually exclusive? Okay, I'm hoping y'all chime in. Good, good. They're definitely not, because the probability is 3/19. Another way of saying it is they can't both occur. Okay, but we have 3/19. That's a number. It's not 0, so they're not mutually exclusive. Okay, then there's independent. And I need to get rid of that and sign because I want to write there and run out of room. I don't think you need the and sign. So now comes independent. Independent is more complicated. Independent means one of three. The first one is a probability of A given B is equal to the probability of A. The second is the probability of B given A. Is equal to the probability B. And the third is the probability of A and B is equal to the probability of A times the probability of B. And that's what it means for two events to be independent. Now, if one of these is true, all of them are true. So the one you should use is the easiest one, and that's going to vary from question to question. Okay, so in this case, are they independent? And this is where you might get your calculator out, and I'm going to let you tell me, what is 4/19? Maybe a couple decimal places? Four divided by 19. Again, you get your calculator out and type in the answer. I can kind of do it in my head, but you can do it better with your calculator. Good, 0.215. 2105. That's the probability of A. How about the probability of A given B? What is that? What's 3/7? And again, you can put down your calculator. Calculators are always allowed. So 3/7 is 0.4286. So are they independent in this case? What do you think? Okay, I'm seeing both yeses and nos, so let me take a look. If we look at number 1, probability of A given B equals the probability of A. Yeah, if one is true, all are true. If one is false, all are false. Okay, so they're equivalent. I'm not going to prove it. That's the hard math I'm not doing for you guys. If you want to chat with me by yourself, if you really want to prove, I can do it, but I'm not doing it for the webinar. But probability of A and B is 0.4286. Probability of A is 0.2105. Those are not equal. They're different numbers. So we can say they are not independent. Now, I bet you can maybe tell me, what do you think the word is for not independent? Yeah, dependent. Okay, so if it's not independent, we call them dependent. Any questions on the idea of mutually exclusive and the idea of independence first? Okay, I want to give you a kind of more of a general idea of what independence means. So what independence means is that knowledge of one does not tell you anything about the other. So in this case, if I tell you that somebody is in the medical profession, then that gives you an information about whether they live in Tahoe. Then they're more likely to live in Tahoe than to not live in Tahoe. Does that make some sense? Okay, so what if I take 2 dice? So I'm not going to cheat or anything. Here's 2 dice. Hopefully you can see the 2 dice. So I'm going to take these 2 dice, and I'm going to roll them. I'm going to say the event A is now that I get a 1 on the first die, and event B is that I get a 1 on the second die. Are they independent? What do you think? Okay, so let's think about it. Aha, I just rolled the dice, and you can't see it, but I'm going to tell you that the first die was a 6. Does that shed light at all on what the second die is, whether it's a 1 or not? Right, it doesn't shed any light on it. You know nothing about the second die because I told you what the first die was. So that tells you these are independent. Any questions on that idea? Okay, whereas if someone's in the medical profession or has a goal of medical profession, it does give you information. Now they're more likely to live in Tahoe. It gave you some new information. Any questions on that as an idea? Okay, let me give you one more example. I have over here. Hopefully you've seen cards before. So you can see these cards, hopefully. So I'm going to pick 2 cards. And now we're going to do the same idea. I'm going to pick 2 cards. And let's let event A be the first card is a king. And event B is the second card of the king. Got it? I'm just going to pick cards at random. Here's the first card. Can you see it, by the way? Not sure if you can see it, but I think you can. Okay. Does that give you information about the second card? Is it more or less likely the second card is a king? Or is it the same? Has the likelihood changed at all? Yeah, it's now less likely the second card is a king. So this is what's called without replacement, and these are dependent events. On the other hand, if I do the same thing, and I pick a card, here's a 7, now I'm going to put it back in, and I'm going to shuffle the deck, not cheating or anything. And now comes the second card. Okay? Knowing the first card was a 7, does that change your probability idea of whether the second card is a king or not? Yeah, I put it back in, so this is with replacement. So now that tells you they are independent. And it makes a difference whether you're with replacement or without replacement. Any questions on this as an idea?
Hey, Larry.
I'm reading your, but let me answer Victor's question first, and then I'll answer yours. Are you required to label the event as independent or dependent on every problem, or only if the question asks us to do so? So the answer is only if the question asks you to do so. But there's sometimes it won't ask you to do it, but if you don't use the fact that they're independent, then you may not be able to solve the problem. Does that make sense? So definitely not everyone. Sometimes you never have to be told, I never am going to ask you if it's independent or dependent, but I could ask you. Okay, now, second question.
Yeah, no, the dice and the card and with replacement and without replacement, that one totally makes sense to me.
Good.
But the probability of the lives in Tahoe with the medical profession analogy, for some reason, like I'm not wrapping my head around that one, you know?
Right, and that one you have to use the formula.
Okay.
So you have to use the equation. I calculated the probability of A, and I got 0.2105. I calculated the probability of A given B, and I got 0.4286.
Okay.
Now, if I look at equation 1, to be independent, those numbers must be equal. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
They're not. I hope you know that 0.2105 is not equal to 0.4286, right?
Yeah.
So they're not independent, they're dependent.
Okay. All right.
And that's it. So if it's not like clearly obvious, like rolling a die or picking a card, then you have to do the calculation.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
All right. Yeah. I'm going to ponder that one a little bit more, but
Yeah.
I follow what you're saying.
And there's some things that you really don't know if they're independent until you do the calculation. Okay, so if I told you, blood type versus, I don't know, blood type versus ethnicity, I actually have no idea whether those are independent or not. The only way to find out is to do a study. Is that clear? If someone tells me they're O positive, maybe they're more likely to be Hispanic. I really don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that one makes sense. Yeah.
But the only way to find out is to calculate it, to actually test maybe 1,000 people's blood, check out Hispanic versus not Hispanic, do the calculation, and then see what happens.
Gotcha. All right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. On the other hand, there's times when it's clear, and like cards are as clear. Okay. Any more questions on independent versus dependent? Okay. So now I have a fun little question, and we're going to have to do some work on it. And the way that is, let me erase this. By the way, you got 5 seconds to tell me not to erase it, or it's going to get erased because I need to. I need that white space. Does it have to be Does that be 1 or 0.99 work? I'm not sure what you mean by 1. Where have I talked about 1? Sheva? Oh, do they have to be equal or if they're close to equal? So to be truly independent, they have to be exactly equal. Okay, to truly be independent, they're exactly equal. If they're really close to being equal, then we usually say it's good enough. So let me give you an example of that. Let's suppose that we survey people without replacement. We're going to survey 2 people in the world randomly to find out if they're Americans. Then technically that is dependent, because if the first person you said, yes, I'm American, then you have 1 fewer person that's American. But we're talking about 300 or so million Americans out of 7 billion people. Taking 1 away isn't going to make a difference. Does that make sense? So in the real world, if it's really, really close, that's good enough for independence. Does that make sense, Sheva? On a test, if I'm going to ask for independence, I'm never going to give you one where you're going to get 0.999993 or something, and you're going to say no. Okay, you'll get, if you take the ratio, you're either going to get 1 or you're going to get something like 0.7 or something. Okay, so I wouldn't, that would be just evil on a test. Okay. But for the real world, when you're doing surveys, we're going to call it independent. As long as the population is huge compared to the sample, then with replacement, without replacement isn't going to matter. That's kind of the important thing for the real world. Okay, now I'm going to erase the definition. And now I have a fun question for you. what I did a few hours before we got into the webinar is I got one of these beauties. Can you see it? Everyone see it? Okay, so here's the question. All right, now that you've seen it, okay, this is going to get picked on Wednesday, by the way. They pick on Sundays and Wednesdays, if I remember right, something like that. And the question is, if I win this, by the way, it is, and actually I'm going to share my desktop for something else because we need to see it. That is, I think it's, I believe it's that one. Okay, Mega Millions. Okay, which, by the way, if it's a winner, and I'm going to be greedy, I only care about the grand prize, I get $227 million. So should you, at this point, go and put a gun to my head and take my ticket so that you can get my $227 million? What do you think? Okay, even if, assuming you're not moral. Okay, right. So Alex says yes. Okay, so you're not getting an A. If you shoot me, you don't get an A. Actually, you lose your instructor. Means that the class is canceled. That would be bad. Okay, it might be worth 227 million, but the question is, by the way, you'll probably have to shoot me. Don't forget the other thing I used to do for the other thing I taught, right? You guys all know? I posted it. I think I told one person. Should warn you. Okay? The other thing I taught was karate. If you shoot me, you don't shoot me, it'll be bad for you. Just let you know. So the question is, how likely is it that this is a winning ticket? Okay, how likely is a winning ticket? And if you look real close, you will see that I bought 3 different set of numbers on this ticket. So the first thing, let's go back to my blank screen. Is we know, I hope you remember, I know it was already 35 minutes ago, but we have a formula that said the probability of a winning ticket, let's call that W for win. By definition, I need to go, is a fraction. Probabilities are always fractions. And the numerator of the fraction will be the number in W, the number of ways that make me win. The denominator are the number in the total. Total number of ways that numbers could be picked by the lottery officials. So you're saying I have a better probability of winning? Absolutely not. But I'll tell you should never pick your own numbers. You should let the computer do it for you. And that's another discussion I don't have time for. But I'll let you know. Yeah, you're much better off letting the computer pick than to pick your own. Trust me. And I did let the computer pick. So other than that, I don't have a better probability. Okay, so now let me do the numerator. The numerator is quite easy. You might all know the numerator. If you don't think of it and I tell you, go, of course. But let's see. Any thoughts on what the numerator is going to be? And again, it helps to see the ticket again. Any thoughts on what that numerator is? 59, good guess, but not quite. 5, there we go. I like Terrence's answer. 3. There are 3 sets of winning numbers because I had to pay $6 for this ticket, by the way. So there's 3, I bought 3 sets of numbers. So there are 3 ways to make me win. Any of the 3 sets of numbers will make me win. And they are different numbers, by the way. So the numerator is a 3. That was easy. It was supposed to be easy, at least. Do you agree that's an easy answer? Counting that. Okay, now comes the hard part, and that's the denominator. Now, put a yes if you recently played Mega Millions. And while you're doing that, I'm going to reshare my desktop. Okay, all right. So Armando has. So you may know, but I'm going to tell everyone else anyway. We need to know how to play. So step one, find a retailer. I just went to the 7-Eleven nearby, tell you that. Step two, and this is important, we have 5 lucky numbers from 1 to 70. Okay, by the way, this changes like every year. And a mega number from 1 to 25. And we have to get our numbers picked. Any questions on that? So 1 to 70, and a mega number from 1 to 29. So I'm going to write that down. 1 to 70, and there are 5 of them, and then one number from 1 to 25. So let me reshare my desktop. And I want to write this out, at least in symbols. So the first thing is we want to find out how many ways are there of selecting 5 numbers between 1 and 70. And we have a way of writing that mathematically. The way you write it is 70 C 5. And that means 70 choose 5. So you're choosing 5 numbers from 70. Okay, is 210 next number and 87? Oh, what were the numbers? Well, it can't be 210 because 70 was not, it has to be from 1 to 70. Okay, so Victor gave me the number. When I get to the calculator, I'll show you that in a minute. But then we also have one number from 1 to 25. We're going to use what's called the multiplication principle. That means that if we have independent events, and by the way, this is independent, okay, your mega number could be the same as one of your 5 numbers. That's allowed. Then what you can do is you can multiply them to get the total. So we're going to multiply by 25. So we're going to have 3 divided by 70 choose 5 times 25. So now what I need to do is I need to go to my calculator. So let me share my desktop. And again, my strong recommendation, always have your calculator with you. And we need to be able to calculate this. So the way we do this is we go 3 divided by parentheses, because the denominator has a multiplication, so we need parentheses about it to force multiplication to be in that denominator and done before you divide. Now, I go to I go to math, and I go to prob. And then I go to, I always forget. I don't do that yet. Let's go quit. Need to go back. First, I have to hit 70. Then I go to math, prob, and then I see number 3 is NCR. See that C? That's kind of the hint. C stands for combinations, and I hit enter. Then I'm choosing 5, so I type a 5. Then I hit the right arrow, and I go times 25, and I close the parenthesis. I want to stop for a second. Are there any questions about this calculation? Any questions? Then I hit enter. Okay, so can I do it one more time? Okay, so I hit 3 divided by, open a parenthesis, I hit 70, then I go math, right arrow to get to prob, and down arrow to get to NCR. Hit enter, and then 5, right arrow, times 25, close the parenthesis. So if 16 or 7 chooses, or maybe if I6 or 7 chooses, would that be our had? Sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. Okay, if I had 6 or 7 numbers, that sounds better. I was picking from, yeah, if you're picking from 6 numbers, then the 70 would be a 6. So if you're picking, what you're picking from is the first number. How many you're picking is the R, or the second number. Does that make sense? So another good.
Well, what I was meaning was that the N right there is actually the total number that we can pick, right? So the 1 through 70, and then the 5 is actually the amount. Is that the amount of numbers? So you have 5 main numbers that you're picking, right?
Yeah, that's how many numbers you're picking.
Yeah.
So for example, if you were playing poker, with a 5-card poker hand, then it would be 52C5 for the number of poker hands.
Gotcha. Okay. So the 5 is constant then.
Yeah, I mean, if you were, instead of playing poker, you were doing blackjack, and you just get 2 cards, it'd be 52C2.
Gotcha. Okay.
You see?
Gotcha.
Because that'd be 2 cards picked instead of 5 cards picked. Okay. So is the probability 9.91, etc.? Is that the probability? Is it around 9.9? Is that approximately the probability? Any thoughts? Give me yes or no. Because my calculator, I see a 9.9. Okay, the answer is no. You can never, ever have more than 100% chance, more than a probability of 1. So worry if you get a number bigger than 1. So what that means is we're not reading it right. So what we have to do is we look at this, and towards the far right, see that E -9? That E -9 means it's scientific notation. So what that really means is move the decimal over to the left 9 places. So the first decimal point you move isn't going to give you a 0, but the next 8 will. So you can have point, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 9. Sorry, 9 missed. One more time. So you're going to have point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9, 9, 1 about. So what do you think? Should I quit my job and start buying some mansions? Think it's a good idea? Yeah, definitely not. Okay, do you think is it possible that it's a winning ticket? Yeah, it's possible. But should you go in here and like cause me all kinds of issues to steal this ticket?
No.
Definitely not. It is not worth your time, I promise you. Okay? It would be a very bad idea to like even have a chance of going to jail because you stole a ticket that had this probability of winning. By the way, you read this number. This is tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000, 100,000, millions, 10 million. So this is about 1 in 100 million chances. Okay, definitely not worth causing me any kind of issue because you might get my ticket. Any questions on that? Okay, I only bought this ticket because I like to bring it up in class, and it's worth, for me, it's worth the $6 just to have a good class. It's not because I think I'm going to become a 200 and something millionaire. Not the reason. Any questions at all on this? Okay. So I want to remind you, even if your dog threw up, sorry about that, it's no fun. This will be on YouTube, so you can always go out and watch it again. All right, so now I think what I'm going to do, so no one's going to leave because about what I'm going to say is really important, by the way, afterwards. Let me reshare. And let me go to the secret word. Because we're done with this portion. We're not done, we're not even close to done with the webinar, but we're done with the portion. The secret word is fraction. Because when you're looking at probabilities, always remember that a probability is defined as a fraction. The number of ways of success, or winning in this case, divided by the total number of ways. So when you do the secret word quiz, the word is fraction. Got it? Because we're going to leave that in a second. Okay, so now we're going to leave it. And now I want to go to something really important that's coming up. By the way, chapter 3 is important. You want to learn it. And, you know, it's going to be hard, just to let you know that. But in terms of the percent of your grade, your course grade, what I'm about to talk to you is a big piece. And that is not all about how to play the lottery, but if we go to our syllabus, I want to remind you of a few things. One is your project 1 is due by October 13th. I know that seems like a long time from now. We're only on the 23rd. October 13th is weeks from now. But there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do on this. Okay. Yeah, Shelby, you're saying your calculator doesn't show up as C, it shows up as NCR. The calculators are a little different depending on the model. If you watch my long video, it'll show the older version, I believe. So I try and give you the newer version in the webinars, the older version in my kind of canned videos. Just let you know. Okay, so October 13th is the project's due. I want to tell you something. At this point, what should you have already done for your project? There's one thing you should have done. Yeah. So I want you to all type in yes or no to I have a partnership of 3 already. It's either yes or no if there's 3 of you. Okay, so I'm seeing, so I want you guys to look at the chat box. I see a bunch of no's. So if you're by yourself, okay, so that means that there are people that either are them by themselves or there's only 2 of you. If there's only 2 of you, please take somebody that's by themselves. If there's 1 of you, please join someone that only has 2 of you. Does that make sense? This is an online class, so you are responsible for being able to work online with people. Okay, that is part of this class. This class can be done fully online. Okay, and that could be via Skype, via email, via message in Canvas, could be whatever. And then I recommend Google Docs tends to be a good way of writing the paper so you can all be writing together. I think now Word has something like that. I don't know it as well done. But make sure you're writing it in something that is collaborative. So this is a kind of time in your, maybe even your chat box you can get together. But remember, there is a project discussion forum, Project 1 discussion forum, and that is something you should be paying attention to and making sure you're accepting people that are looking for partners. And if you don't have a partner, then post on the ones that have partners and see, do you already have 3? And if they say yes, then go to the next one until you have somebody. The other thing is make sure that your partner hasn't dropped the class. I've lost a few people. That does happen. People realize, even though they don't realize on the first day, but they realize after the end of the first week. I tell you on the first day, there's a big time commitment. you kind of learn about it by the end of the first week. So I do lose some people because they don't have time. That's a typical thing because it does take a lot of time. So make sure that your partner hasn't dropped, because I've lost a few. But I looked at the other sections, the other instructors, I've lost fewer than they have. So I can feel good about that. So, but I still don't like to lose students, but if it happens, it happens. So just know that I have lost some people, so it means that your partner may or may not be there. Make sure that you're communicating pretty often. And if you have lost someone, then quickly get a partner. Okay, so again, October 13th is the date at which you should have your project done. I want to also note, under my projects forum, Thursday at 8 a.m. before it's due, you should have your draft done. So I'm going back in time from the deadline. It's always a good way to do some time management. Is we know that October 13th is when it's due. October 13th is a Sunday, by the way. The Thursday before that is October 10th. And that's 8 a.m. Most people don't want to have to wake up that early before 8 a.m. So that means October 9th, you want to have this project done in terms of your first draft. So we only have a couple weeks to have your first draft finished. Okay, now let me go through and click on this Project One link. And let me read through some of it. Not necessarily word for word, but kind of the idea. The first thing you should do is you should think of a quantitative investigation that someone might contract out to have done. Okay, I'm hoping that you know what the word quantitative means. Okay, any questions on the word quantitative? So one good way to find out if you have a quantitative investigation is write down your survey question and ask your partner, what should your partner's answer look like? Any thoughts? Yeah, it has to be a number. If your partner does not have a number coming out of that partner's lips or out of their typing if you're chatting, then this won't work. Okay? You have to have numbers. And I recommend a good variety of numbers. So for example, don't do a survey question, how many times have you been to South Africa? Because what are people going to say? Almost everyone. Yeah, 0, and it's not very interesting. So make sure that there are a lot of different answers that you would expect. And not everyone has the same answer, or maybe only 1 or 2 answers that you're going to hear. Is that clear? So you want a quantitative investigation that is robust with lots of numbers. All right. So I say then go and perform, but actually before that, what I recommend you do is once you've decided on a quantitative investigation, plan your study, and then go to your Project One board and type in what your plan is, what your survey question is, and what your survey technique is going to be. I will look at it and let you know if that's going to work and modifications that might be needed. So it's really important that you do that, because if you have a plan that doesn't work, it'll be a disaster for you. So if you let me know ahead of time, I'll be able to help you out and tell you, yeah, this is going to work. Go ahead. Great. I look forward to reading your project. Or I'm going to say, that's not quantitative, so it's not going to work. Or I'm going to say, your survey technique is not what it's supposed to be, which I'm going to mention in a bit. So here's how you might want to change it. Okay, then you're going to, once I approve and say it's good, it's going to work, then you're going to go out and perform the investigation. So that means you're going to have to conduct a survey. You're going to have to ask people, okay? And produce a report as though you were handing the report to the person paying for your services. So you want to think about the reader of your report not being me, but by being your client. Okay, the purpose of the report is to make recommendations based on your findings. The entire paper should have recommendations every time you cite something. Make a recommendation to your client based on this that you just found, this statistic or this chart, what might the client do? Okay. Make sure that you include a statement of who hired you. And again, it's fictitiously hired. You don't actually have to find someone to pay you, but you can imagine someone paying you and write that in the report. Okay. In your project, you're going to have to talk about the sampling technique. The sampling technique must be either stratified sampling or cluster sampling. Okay, those are the only two possibles. Okay, it says you could use simple random. Good luck. That's always impossible. But I put that in, but I didn't give you a link, but I'll let you know. No one ever does simple random because it's too impossible. So stratified or cluster, that's what you're all going to do. If you think you can do simple random, you're probably wrong. But if you're sure you're right, then post it. I'll let you know. But post how you're doing it. Okay, I have links to it. I'll let you read through the links, but that's a rehash of what I talked about, what stratified and cluster sampling are. I strongly recommend you look at those links as you're working your project, as you're working on the planning of the project. You should discuss any bias that might have occurred due to your sampling technique. Okay, notice that you had to do this for the discussion post that was due last week. Do you remember that? Okay, that was a requirement. So hopefully you've learned about these sampling techniques. Note that bias involves a misrepresentation of the population so that the sample data will not represent the population data. So any findings of a potential bias should provide convincing argument why you think your sample is either more likely to be higher or more likely to be lower than the mean. Okay, it's only a bias if it's going to change what the mean is. So if you ask, say, how many units are you taking? That was your survey question. But you only ask people with type O positive blood, that's probably not biased because your blood type probably has absolutely nothing to do with number of units you're taking. Is that clear? Okay, on the other hand, if you were asking people how many units they're taking, and you only asked students that are online students instead of face-to-face students, that might have bias because they're probably going to, online students tend to take fewer units because they often have full-time jobs. So then you would say there's bias, and because of the bias, you would expect you're going to have a lower sample mean than a population mean. Any questions on that idea? Okay, and again, it's just going to be guesses, but it should be reasonable guesses on what the bias is. All right, the variable must be quantitative. Notice I keep emphasizing it because that's the disaster that happens sometimes. The sample size must be greater than 30. We will learn later in this class, in a few weeks, why that's important. Right now, it's greater than 30. I do not recommend 3,000 because that's totally wasting your time. I do not give you more points on your project if you do, say, 31 versus 3,000. You don't get more points for doing 3,000. But if you do 22, that's not good because that's not more than 30. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, there's a big warning, don't use the word random without fully explaining what you mean because you probably did not survey randomly. That's usually impossible. Another note, and this is a legal note that's important, is that it is against the law to survey children. So if you think you're going to go to an elementary school and do a survey, don't even think about it. Okay? The only children you're allowed to survey are children who happen to be taking a class at a college, and you ask them at the college, because their parents actually have signed away their rights. I'm not sure if you realize that, but that's the truth. 30 is minimum for the group. No, 30 is not the minimum for the group, and it's not the minimum for each member of the group. 31 is the minimum. Terrence? So if there are 3 in your group, and say you each ask 11 people, you got 33, and that's great. Does that make sense, Terrence? But if you each ask 10, that's not enough because 30 is not bigger than 30. It has to be more than 30. Okay, and that's going to be our standard in this whole class. So that's going to come up later. Okay, these are good questions, so please ask. That's the whole point. Any questions so far? Okay, what you're going to include are all relevant charts. You must include a histogram, a stem and leaf, and a box and whiskers. Okay? Remember, I kind of showed you those in the webinar last time. You may include a pie, a line plot, etc., only if it is going to help your project, like explain more stuff. Okay, you must use a spreadsheet program. You are not allowed to use a calculator. Do you remember in the orientation, I said, what is my number one most important thing that I consider when I write down what you have to do in this class? Do you guys remember that? Anyone remember? Okay, the number one most important thing that I consider when I write down what you have to do. Google Spreadsheet's important, but that's not the number one thing I consider. Anyone know? Okay, if you don't remember, I'll tell you. Okay, this class must be acceptable for transfer to pretty much all universities. Do you all agree that, my guess is just about all of you would be dropping this class if it wasn't acceptable for transfer? All right on that? Okay, whenever I get calls from university officials, the most common thing they ask me is, did I require a spreadsheet for my class? And as soon as I say yes, they put a check, it transfers. If I say no, okay, which I never do because this is a requirement, but had I said no, then a lot of universities don't accept it for transfer. So if you're complaining that you have to use a calculator, you understand that you're not allowed to use a calculator, understand why. So this is the component that requires a spreadsheet. My Google spreadsheet is made for this project and the next project. Okay, just a note. So I showed you that last time on how to use it. So it's made for this project. All right, just a note. You have to choose those charts. You also have to choose the statistics. Okay, remember the statistics. Again, in fact, maybe I'll just pop up the spreadsheet so you'll see. Just a second. Probably the first one. No, it's the third one. The statistics you need are the minimum, the mean. Don't need the sample variance. So just because it's here doesn't mean you need it, by the way. So let me tell you, minimum, mean, the sample standard deviation, the median, the maximum, the third quartile, Q3, and is your sample size. You need Q1, which is the first quartile. These guys is confidence stuff, and H1, that's coming up way past today. That's not in your project. You don't need any of this. You do need your Z-score. See, it says change this. Don't forget to change that number. You write 25 or whatever it was when you copied it. I'm going to nail you on points. Make sure you give an X value that is important. And that is often checking for outliers. Also, you want to check a Z-score for an important number. So if your question was, say, how many hours a day did you sleep last night, then you might want to look at the Z-score for 8 because that's the recommended hours. So our school has a statistical program that allows you to input data, create graphs automatically. Yes, you can use that as long as it's a spreadsheet, and you need to make a screenshot of it and put that into your paper. Okay, but remember, if you have questions about it, I may not be able to help you because I may not know your school's program. StatGraphics, never heard of it. So the problem with using that one, Victor, is that if you need help with it, you're on your own. Okay? This one is made so you type in the numbers, it's all there for you. The histogram's there. If you go to stats, you can do box plot, stem, and leaf. Just a note, outliers, no outliers. You can choose to include outliers or not include outliers. Okay, I put it that way. Also for the stem and leaf, this is 10 to the power, so this is the, if you want it to be 2-digit numbers, then you make it a 1. If everything is 3-digit numbers, make that a 2. Okay, that's the only thing you really have to know. The other thing is it might give you all kinds of warnings about viruses. I'm not going to give you a virus with this, I promise. So you have to hit OK, let it happen. Okay, but you can use yours if you want. But again, the warning is you're not going to get help from me because I don't know how to use it. And I've never seen it before. But it has to be a spreadsheet program. It has to be typing in your numbers, and everything should happen to you in a spreadsheet. If it's not a spreadsheet, it doesn't count. Okay, it's not just a program, but it has to be a spreadsheet. Okay, it can't just be like your calculator on a computer. That doesn't count. So if Stat Graphics is your calculator on a computer, that doesn't count. It has to look like a spreadsheet. Okay, let me go back to the project one requirements. All right. What I need to mention is this sample standard deviation. That's the biggie. You must have an entire paragraph just on that. Okay, that's the most important of all the statistics. The other one that's there, sorry, IQR is important, mode could be important, and that's it. Okay, those are the important ones. So, in particular, that standard deviation, and let me show you what it says. It says you must copy and paste your spreadsheet result column into the project to receive credit for the project. Okay, I will give you a very mean grade if I don't see it. So that has to be there. It's not hard. I know if you're using Windows, there's something called the snipping tool, and then you can just use the snipping tool and grab it, and that always works. I know a Mac has something similar. Okay, just a note, a couple more things. This is not a comparison study. So if you think you need 2 columns of data, think again. This is 1 column. If you're using stratified sampling with, say, men and women, all the men and women together are in the same column. The statistics are not about men, they're not about women, they're about whatever the survey question was. The men versus women, to make sure you had it proportionate, is not about comparing the two. It's about making sure you don't have bias. If you're doing, Caucasian versus non-Caucasian, same idea. You set quotas, but you only have, not can set quotas. If you are doing a stratified sample, you must set quotas. If you're doing cluster sampling, you don't set quotas. Does that make sense? Okay, and again, there's a step-by-step process on doing those that I have a link to. Okay, so it's a single column. That's a big error I see, and it's really ugly on the grade if you have more than 1 column. Worry a lot. You should have 1 histogram. You should have 1 box plot. You should have 1 stem and leaf diagram. Okay. Okay, you should interpret. Okay. You should compare and contrast. Again, talk about how the client is going to use the histogram, how the client is going to use the box and whiskers plot to make a decision. What decision will be made? That's most important. Okay. Again, I have a bunch of stats. The standard deviation. Let me read this important piece. The project without at least a full paragraph devoted to the standard deviation cannot receive an A grade. Okay? Part of the standard deviation is the empirical rule, if you can use it. If not, then you have to resort to Chebyshev's theorem. Okay? You can always use Chebyshev's theorem, but the empirical rule tells you more. Okay? Again, based on the empirical rule or based on Chebyshev's, whichever you're going to end up with, what are you going to recommend for your client? What decisions will be made? Talk about z-scores. Don't just use the one that said change this. Use the important z-scores for yours. Okay, z-scores come from the standard deviation. Remember, it tells you how many standard deviations from the mean that value is. Okay? You don't need to define the statistics. You need to talk about the statistic and how it's going to be used by your client to make a decision. Okay, I want to mention that this is a paper, so I do expect correct English and grammar. I expect a introduction. I expect a body, and I expect a conclusion, just like in any good paper that you've had in an English class or any other class that had writing. So this is a written essay. Okay? I don't have a requirement on pages, but if you think you can do all of this in one page, think again. Okay? It's not possible. Typically, including the charts and stuff, it's usually 8 pages to 12 pages, somewhere around that. Sometimes you can get away with 7, but there's a lot of stuff that you got to put in. And the charts take a couple pages. Okay, they do take a few. Okay, so just to know, let's suppose that your study was, how old were you when you first learned the quadratic formula? And let's suppose you found the mean was 15.3. Don't just say, the mean could be used to understand when people learn the quadratic formula. That's not a decision that's made. Okay, instead, you would say, students are learning the quadratic formula on average just after they turn 15. Based on this, high schools should be leery about moving chemistry, which requires this knowledge, to the freshman year. So that would be if, let's say, your client was a principal of a high school, and they have to decide when, to teach chemistry. Do you see that? So a decision is made based on that number. So MLA, double-spaced or what? I like double-spaced because that way I could put comments in it. That's the main reason for double-spaced, because I will be commenting so that you can read the comments and understand where you made mistakes or where you did well. You do need to quote you need to have references in terms of, for example, if you're doing stratified sampling and you're going to use a reference to find out the population proportions for each strata, then you need to have a reference for that. You need to have a reference and you need to quote the reference. I'm not a stickler whether you're using exactly MLA or not, but the reference must be quoted. Does that make sense, Terrence?
Yes.
Okay, but it is important that you have good grammar. That's important that you have full paragraphs. It's a paper. That's more important to me. Okay, and if it's not readable, that's a problem.
Should we have a reference page at the end?
If you want to, you can either have a reference page at the end, or you could put it at the bottom of a page if you're referencing. You choose. I'll let you choose on that one. That's 2 different styles, and I'll let you choose a style. Does that make sense? So you choose whatever's easier for you, but you have to cite your references.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. This isn't an English class, but your English should be pretty good. Okay. All right. And then you should also talk about how you could better do the study had you had more resources and time. So that might be, well, there was bias that you found. By the way, if you think there's no bias, think again. It is like impossible to do a survey that has no bias. Okay? So there's always, how would you do it so that there was less bias? Other things is, what other questions might you ask now that you've seen your data that might really understand and help your client, that you could expand on the study if you were to do it? Because you're only asking one survey question. Okay? Any questions on that so far? Okay, just a note, and I recommend you read this. I have a link to feedback that I have given in the past. I will give you feedback. If you email me your draft, I will give you feedback. And this is just some of the typical feedback that I gave. I'm not going to read it, but I'll let you read through it so that you don't make the same mistakes. Okay?
Hey, Larry, quick question.
Sure.
So, all our papers should be different, right? Even though we're working in this group, we're only working in a group to get the data, but all our papers should be different. Like, I'm not going to take a paragraph from my partner, and she's not going to.
Okay, wait, let me answer that before you keep talking. The answer is no. You have one paper for your group.
Okay.
And what you should do is you should divvy up the responsibilities, and you should all read the final draft. You should all read your rough draft before you send it to me. Does that make sense? and then I'll read your final draft before it gets submitted. Only one of you needs to submit the paper. But please put all 3 of your names on it, your full names, so that I can give everyone credit. Everyone will get the same score. Got it? So everyone can get the same score. Only one of you needs to submit it, and that's important. So you should only have one paper for the 3 of you. This is a collaborative project, not an individual project. Got it? And again, you could do pieces. Let me talk about certain kind of populations people have done in the past. The easiest population to choose, and by the way, you do need to state what your population is. The easiest is students, and that's because you're a student. Okay, it doesn't mean you can do students, but that's one possibility. It could be community college students in California, or maybe college students in California. I know some of you are university students, and it could be college students in California. That way you can ask at your university, and then someone else asks at a college, at a community college. Okay, I do want, if possible, it may not be possible, for all of you to partake in the surveying. So maybe 11 people each. It should not take long to ask 11 people. Do you agree? That should not take a long time. If you're going to be asking in a classroom, you must get the permission of the professor. Okay? And the professors almost always say yes. Got it? Just note, if you're going to ask for online students, don't expect a very high response rate. That's just kind of typical. If you're going to ask in class, everyone will answer your question. So, but again, there could be bias if you don't ask online students. So it's interesting. There's some issues on that. And it's okay to have bias, but make sure you recognize the bias. Any questions on that? Another possibility for your population are customers where you work. Okay, if you're going to do that, and if you don't own the company, please ask your boss to make sure it's okay. I do not want anyone to get fired because of this project. Bosses are usually fine with it. Not always, but usually fine. So you ask your boss, and you can do customers at your work. And that, you know, and there's lots of survey questions you could ask if business is what you're interested in. So that's another type of thing. Another possibility, which is much harder actually, is people in town. The hard part about that is coming up with a good representative sample. And also voluntary response bias is usually really bad. So your population has to be large. So your population cannot just be, you know, my friends, because you don't have a large enough population unless you have 20,000 friends or something. But I doubt it. Okay, so it needs to be a large population. Any questions? Yeah.
Do we need to get names of these people? Or anything?
Definitely not. Definitely not. Anonymous responses are almost always better. Okay. The only information you might need of the people might be if you stratify, say, by race, you would need their race. You don't put their race in the project. You just tell about how you stratify by race. Or it might be gender, and you might need to ask someone what their gender is. And again, I'm not going to get politically correct or incorrect. You decide what gender means. Sound good? In the old days, it was so much easier, but now it's harder. So I'm going to let you write in your paper what you decided gender means. Sound good? Okay. So that's something to do if you can do stratified. If you can do cluster sampling, then that's a whole different thing. Then you really don't have to ask their race or gender or anything like that. You're just going to go to the clusters and ask in the clusters. Any questions about this? Okay. A quick recommended timeline is I recommend that you post on the Project One discussion forum what your idea is for your project. Probably maybe by a week from now, you know, or even earlier, but don't wait too long. Don't wait too long. Because I'll get back to you quickly, but it takes time to do this study. Then you got to do the survey, and then you got to write your rough draft. You want to make sure that's due by that Wednesday, done by that Wednesday. And I do first come, first serve. So the first draft that comes in is the first one I read and provide feedback to. So if I get a whole lot Wednesday at midnight, then you may have to wait a while for me to read it, because there's a lot of you, and I do my best. That Thursday, I teach one class. I don't have anything else on my plate, but it does take me time to read these and to provide feedback. So again, if you wait till 7:59 a.m. on Thursday morning, then you're going to be last to be read. Just let you know that. And after 8, I don't read it. I will answer any questions you post on the Project One discussion forum. I read that often. Okay. And I agree with you. Google Docs is a really good tool. I'm not going to play favorites, but most people think Google Docs is the best tool. I think it's 7:26. I always still try and end by 7:30. But I've said everything I need to say in my stock question. Just a note about webinar times. If you want a different times, you need to post pretty soon to give people a chance to respond, because I need a few people to say, yes, I want that time. Just a note, in terms of my schedule, I'll even post it. By the way, I have very few secrets in my life, so posting is no big deal to me. Here's my calendar, my personal calendar. And for next week, Monday I am not going to be available on Monday. So Monday is not going to happen. So if you want to know, I'm Jewish, and it's our big high holiday. So I do celebrate that high holiday. So Monday is not going to happen next week. Tuesday, I don't actually have to go to this teaching talk, but I do teach from 1 till 3. So you have to, if you want it on Tuesday, it can't be any time between 1 and 3. Can't have to end before 1. Then you need to get to class, which takes 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And then evenings, I'm fine. Either evening, Monday or Tuesday, I can make it. So if you post a request and you get other people, then I'll understand. Sheva, I might know your relative if you live in Tahoe. Do I? Yeah, we go to temple together. Okay. So we got another one that celebrates. Okay, so just to let you know, I do celebrate that high holiday. So I'm not going to be, I won't do it on Monday. In fact, I don't even teach my 201 class. I'll be at temple. But Tuesday, I'm available. Okay, any questions? And again, post your question in the Q&A forum. If I see a few people that say, yeah, I want to do it that time, okay, that isn't, I'd probably do it Tuesday night, since we're doing it Monday this week. So Tuesday evening would be the next week. Then if I see a bunch of people that want that other time, then I'll go for it. Okay, and if 6 doesn't work and 7 works better, I could do that. Later than 7, like 8 o'clock, I start getting tired, and I'm not a night person, so you probably don't want me to do it later than that. Okay, so again, you can post in your discussion. I like to switch back and forth. I'm not going to always have it at the same time. Okay, but I can go Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, that I can do. Okay, so again, we're out of time, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. So this is a good time. Maybe I'll unshare so I get to see. All right, thanks, Terrence. Have a good week, and don't forget, the secret word was talked about a while back. You'll have to go find it if you're watching this, and if you try to at the end and hope to find it, I don't do it that way. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the project, or about probability, or about anything about the class, or anything else. And maybe I'll be super smiling next week, because maybe I'll be a super millionaire, but I doubt it. We saw that probability. I have never won more than $2, by the way. And I've been doing this for like a lot of years. Still confused about the beginning of the project. Okay, so the first thing you do, well, the beginning of the project is get partners. And my guess is that's not what you're talking about, confused about. That's the very beginning. Step 1 is to get partners. Step 2 is to come up with a survey question that you're interested in, okay, that someone else might be interested in also. So there's lots of survey questions people can do. So I'll give you an example. Don't use my example. So for example, a survey question that you might be interested in is maybe you are interested in how many ounces of meat people eat a week, because maybe you are from Modesto and you want to be a farmer, because I get a lot of people from Modesto for some interesting reason, and that would be something that a rancher might be interested in. What are people doing nowadays? Okay, and that would be a good survey question. It's quantitative, and you may have to help people with maybe a picture or something on what an ounce of meat looks like or something. Does that make sense? So you're looking for a quantitative survey question that is interesting to somebody that might make some decisions based on the answer. Just one question, exactly. Just one. Project 2 will have 2, by the way, possibly. Okay. And by the way, even though you asked privately, I won't say who you are, but office hours, I am available in person in office hours. I am always here for my office hours, unless I tell you otherwise. A week from today, I will not be in my office hours. As I mentioned, I do celebrate the Jewish holiday. So there are a couple days I'm not, and I'll let you know ahead of time. And I'll put that in an announcement that I won't be there for that office hour. But Monday through Friday, except next Monday, I'm in my office for office hours. Okay. And again, if you can't get here in person, we can also chat this way too. You just have to let me know to log in, so I'm logged in and talk to you. Any other questions? Any other questions? I'm always happy to answer questions. Okay, and Victor and Constance, have a good night. And again, I hang out until either it's been a while since anyone asked questions or everyone's out of the room already. Any other questions?
Larry, quick question. So just to go back on that sample question you just gave. So so once I do the survey on that question, am I trying to sell you the product basically? Like, so now I'm trying to tell you why.
You're not trying to sell a product. What you're trying to do is you're giving information to your clients. Yeah. So it wouldn't be me. So I wouldn't be a client about that. I do not. Yeah. I do not have a farm, by the way, with cattle. It would be the cattle rancher, and you're going to say, "Hey, we did the survey and we found out that students are only having 2 ounces of meat a week, right? That was the mean." And then you would say, "Well, it looks like you're not going to be able to sell much beef because they're not eating it. So you have a choice: either change your business or you might need to advertise." Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that, but so that kind of sounds like I am pitching a sale, though.
You're not pitching a sale. You're giving some suggestions based on the data. You're not selling a product. You're giving suggestions based on data. And then you look at the standard deviation and you say, the spread was huge. So, there's going to be some people who are really going to be doing it. Most won't, but there's going to be some. They're going to be buying lots of meat. You see that? Because of standard deviation.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so it's not a sales pitch. It's an information from your data and suggestions based on the information. You're not trying to get money from them, that's for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Armando or Chava or Brianna or Terrence or Parrish? Any other questions? Give it another minute, and then we'll say goodnight. Okay, I think I'll say goodnight. For all of you who are watching this as an archive webinar, the secret word is in there somewhere. And please post on the Q&A forum if you have questions about like probability or homework. And please post on the Project One discussion board if you have questions about Project One. Because that way we can really have them split up because they're really different. And there will be lots of questions about Project One. And I'll be helping you out. And you can answer each other's questions too if you know what the answer is. So have a good night. And I'll see you next week. And I'll be checking on the forums often throughout the week. Bye.